Okay, my name is Josh Bowling. I'm a firefighter here at the city of Springfield on truck 2. We're going to be doing forcible entry. The exits are over there, out that door, bathrooms that way. Refreshments are in the back of the room. If you guys have any questions, just raise your hands and we'll get to them as we go. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so learning objective number 1 will be describing the basic principles of forcible entry. Forcible entry, as we know, we use it to gain access. We want to do as minimal damage as we possibly can, but at the same time, ultimately, a lot of times we need quick access, so we just kind of have to do what needs to be done. So where to force entry, a lot of times that'll depend on the location of the fire, stage of the fire, the effort that it's going to require. If it's going to take a lot of effort to force entry, sometimes we'll have to change tactics for that. And sometimes we might have to circle back later on in the incident and force entry when we have more time than on initial fire attack. Sometimes it's best to wait before you just crank the door. If you just force the door and then you find out, well, this incident wasn't as far along as we thought, maybe we should have just waited. So sometimes it's better just to wait. Location of the opening, these are just some considerations. So a lot of times, the flow path of the house will determine where you're going to force the doors and how and if you're going to leave them open or if you're going to close them. If you want to force the door and then pull it back to, or if you want to force the door and open it in preparation for positive pressure ventilation. Any entry into the structure is ventilation. So trying before we cry. If it's unlocked, then obviously it's a lot easier to just turn the knob and go in than to just break through the jam and tear the door up. Lock boxes. Lock boxes are nice. They give us keys, especially in places where there's a lot of doors. We can go through the lock box, we can get the master keys. We can get keys into special rooms that in the building that might be necessary. It's going to allow a lot quicker entry than just forcing all the doors, and it ultimately reduces property damage. Here's some considerations. Doors and locks. So what's some factors that must be considered when deciding where and how to perform forcible entry?
Where the fire is.
Where the fire is, okay. Ease of entry.
How much ventilation you're going to supply.
Yeah, if you're going to be cutting open a giant bay door, is that going to be a good option? If it's a small fire, maybe adding a lot of oxygen. Yeah, some good factors. So we got some structures in our jurisdiction that might pose difficult or unusual forcible entry circumstances. Sometimes we'll have burglar bars. There's a Pizza Hut down here on Grant. It used to have like a really secure back door. It would be a drawn out deal. It had a drop bar and then it had multiple deadbolts, solid steel door, and concrete jam. I mean, it was in concrete, it was steel jam. It was it would be a very difficult door. Now our second learning objective is describing forcible entry tools. So there's various tools, a lot of different tools that we'll be using to do forcible entry. First thing first, we want to use the appropriate PPE for forcible entry tools. So there's 4 categories. Cutting tools, pushing, pulling tools, prying tools, and striking tools. Cutting tools are powered manually or use another power source. No cutting tool will cut all materials. Various different types of blades for like a K12. Different chainsaw chains. If you're, the concrete chain to just a regular chainsaw chain to carbide tip chain to bullet chain. There's all different types of chains that we run across that some work better than others. But mainly we want to use the cutting tool in a way that it was designed to be used for. So if it's designed to cut steel, we want to use it to cut steel. If it's designed to cut wood, use it to cut wood. Because we don't want to damage the tool or endanger the operator or not be able to accomplish the task that we were assigned. So 2 main types of axes, pickhead axe, flathead axe. The pickhead axe obviously has a pick, the flathead axe is just a flat surface, can also be used for a striking tool. Some different metal cutting devices, bolt cutters, rebar cutters. I've never seen one of those in real life. Cutting torch. Could also probably put the K12 on there. Not use a cutting torch in a flammable atmosphere. It's probably a good tip. It's Alright, so then there's some different hand saws, some other cutting tools. A lot of the stuff we don't really...
The drywall saw on it.
Yeah. A lot of the stuff we don't really use, but
Get that drywall saw so we can get through that drywall.
Yeah.
Mildly concerned with drywall.
How are we gonna get out of this drywall room?
The circular saw, rotary saw, reciprocating saw, chainsaw. They're all, can be operated off different power sources. They can be just battery powered, gas powered, or just like powered from an outlet. Obviously, we want to be familiar with the saws that we have, and we follow all the recommendations for them. You don't want to force the saw beyond its limits. So if it's having a hard time, then you probably should reevaluate what you're doing with it. All of our saws are capable; they just need to be used properly. Obviously, we want to wear appropriate eye protection, ear and hand protection. Once again, never force any power saw beyond its limits. Sometimes if you're using different saws, if you're using a cutting torch, then you're going to be having some sparks. If you're using K12, you can be throwing sparks. So it's a good idea to have a charged hose line or fire extinguisher at least somewhere close. Obviously, we never want to use the rotary saw to cut the shell. The tank. We got a lot of
gas
caution.
tank.
Yeah. Really want to, anytime we're using saws, we want to focus on safety. So that's why there's a lot of cautions in this PowerPoint to focus on the safety.
Do we want to file the rakers on a carbide saw? Is that
you want to, any chainsaw chain or anything, you just mainly want to follow the manufacturer recommendations. So whatever the manufacturer recommends, that's the process you should
do
follow.
you think it would be effective?
So usually you can find all that stuff in the manufacturer recommendations. So prying tools. You use prying tools for opening doors, opening locks, opening windows, moving heavy objects, basically using mechanical advantage. To your advantage, door frame acts as a fulcrum. This is what I'm talking about. Mechanical advantage. Applying force to a smaller location to break the lock or the deadbolt or whatever is holding you locked to the door. Here's some different manual prying tools. Obviously, the Halligan tool is our main go-to. It's what we use on 99% of all prying operations. We do have a hydraulic door opener now. It's a prying tool as well. It's just hydraulically operated instead of just mechanically operated. Here's some pushing and pulling tools. The various hooks, striking tools, sledgehammer, battering ram, flathead axe, tools used in combinations, the irons. So flathead axe married to a Halligan bar is considered the irons. So that's used for a lot of forcible entry operations. So note the tools described in this chapter are not intended to be a comprehensive list. There's a lot of different tools available. There's, you know, a lot of various tools for forcible entry and for all firefighting operations, and that's not a complete list, just some of the main ones. 5 of the main tools that are used commonly for forcible entry. What's one?
Axe.
Flathead axe. Okay.
Halligan.
Halligan. Okay. 12. Okay.
Chainsaw.
Bolt cutters, maybe. And we'll say our new
Hydraulic prying tool.
Our new hydraulic prying.
That's the most common one, I think.
Yeah.
The rubbish
Used
hook.
all the time. The rubbish hook.
Okay. Explain considerations for forcible entry tool safety. So it can result in strains, sprains, fractures, abrasions, lacerations. Basically, you know, whenever you're using a tool in a tight spot, you can really, you know, you can hurt yourself. So you got to be careful. You want to use all your PPE, and you just, you know, basically only use undamaged tools and train with them. So you want to train in good, clear conditions and on, you know, door props, and then so that way whenever it's dark and you're in your gear or you're on air, it's more muscle memory than just, you know, your first time doing it. So, you know, you select the right tool. Don't use a pulling tool for a striking tool, and you know, or a prying tool for a striking tool. Use the tools for the intended purposes. So, you want to ensure that you have enough room to operate the tool. So sometimes that means you just have to use a different technique. So if you're forcing a door and you know, it's an outward swinging door and you're not going to have enough room between the wall, you're going to have to kind of change your technique a little bit. So one thing you want to be conscious of is what is on the other side of the door. So if you have heavy fire conditions on the other side of the door, you want to be on air, full gear, prepared for that, and then also prepared to close the door. And you know, whenever the door does, if you're putting a lot of pressure on it, if you and another person are both prying on the door, just be aware of whenever it does release, you can go flying off the porch or wherever. So tool safety, just some tips for tool safety. So safety with power saws, like I said, the power saws are, you know, that's dangerous to be operating them, and especially the conditions we use them in. So we want to use full PPE. We want to fully inspect the saw before and after each use. So if you inspect the saw and then you find that the chain is super loose, you want to tighten it then. And if you use the saw, then you might, after using it for a while, you might have to retighten the chain so you don't throw the chain off, or make sure the bar nuts are tight, things like that. Or checking the K12 and ensuring that the blade's not cracked, or ensuring that it's still got enough cutting material left to continue to be used, or else you need to just put a new blade on it. So here's just some other tips for safety. So some actions we can take: full PPE, using lighting. You know, if you have extra lighting you can use to operate your cutting area, it's better. Trying to just take your time and be careful. Alright, so now we're going to talk about carrying forcible entry tools. So this is going to depend on what you're carrying or what you're using. So the pickhead axe, you know, you want to carry it underneath your armpit and trap the blade between your arm and your side, and then combine tools and the pike bowl. You want to carry your pike end down, so not to hook anybody or stab anybody. So power tools, main thing is using 2 points of contact. You don't really want to just wag it around with one arm. Also, always having the chain brake on. So, how should each of the tools be carried? How should we carry the axe chest?
Like so. It's cutting edge in between your arm and you're covering up the.
Okay, here's some methods of forcing entry through doors. You always want to consider resulting damage. You want to begin with the minimum amount of damage and proceed to maximum amount. So, obviously we're going to try before we pry. Rapid entry lockbox systems, and using door control. So here is just okay. So here's some various door locks, mortise locks, cylindrical locks, rim locks, high security locks. Lock bolt, latch bolt, that's just kind of the components of a mortise lock. The cylinder lock. There's various different types of locks here. Okay, so we were talking about earlier, whenever we're performing forcible entry, we want to, anytime you force entry, or anytime you open any door, you're creating a ventilation opening. Any door that's open is now a ventilation opening or an exit, depending on fire, wherever the fire is, and ventilation, what they're doing. So it's good to coordinate that with the interior activities. So if you know that, that it's going to be a while before the hose line's stretched, you want to shut the door back, or if you're forcing it and you're opening the door and you know shortly after, okay, we're going to be ventilating. So you just want to coordinate that and continually monitoring to make sure the door is still open. So if it closes on you, you want to know that, or if it's still open, you want to know that. Breaking the door glass, it might be difficult and costly. Anytime you break the glass, it's usually more costly than just breaking or just forcing the door. It's also, once it's broken, it can't be unbroken, it can't be closed. It's now a ventilation opening for the remainder of the operation. So if you're forcing swinging doors, you can look for the hinges. So if you can see the hinges, you know, okay, it's an outward swinging door. If you cannot see the hinges, then you know, okay, it's an inward swinging door. That's the quickest way to know if it's going to be an outward or inward swinging door, and that changes your tactic depending on how you're going to force it, how you're going to manipulate the Halligan to force the door. That's what you want to look for. So if you're doing an inward swinging door, here's the one firefighter method. For the inward swinging door, so the two firefighter method, usually one firefighter will hold the Halligan and call out how they want the second firefighter to strike the tool and when to stop, using different commands like hit or drive or stop. So if you want them to hit once, you say hit. If you want them to continually hit, you say drive. And if you want them to stop, then you would say stop.
What is that hole on that? Is that a maul on
Yeah,
that?
it's a maul. So
where's
the ads,
the hole?
the ads can go in there.
Oh, gotcha.
So outward swinging doors, there's some different techniques they're using. I would say these are probably your secondary techniques for forcing an outward swinging door. Pulling the hinges or cutting the hinges is going to take longer than just trying to force the door conventionally. Double swinging doors, it's a good technique for doing that. They're usually just, if they're double swinging, then they'll be hinged on each side with a locking mechanism in the middle. Doors with drop bars, here's some different methods for forcing those. You can use the ram bar or Halligan to spread the space between the doors. And then once you've got the door spread, then you can insert a tool to lift the drop bar up, out. You could use, if you see carriage bolt heads, then you could use the K12 to cut the carriage bolt heads, and then use you could drive the rest of the bolt through, and then dropping the stirrups for the drop bar. And then the other one, like they're saying, is you can insert the K12 blade through the opening and then cut the bar. So sometimes the bars are super lightweight too, and if it's just a piece of rebar, then you could bend that with just your standard irons. Or sometimes sometimes just the stirrups are just really light gauge steel, and so if you were to conventionally force the door, it would go ahead and force. So drop bars don't necessarily mean that it's not an option. It's just it might just take a little bit more of outside the box. So all these, I think that it's best to go ahead and start the door and try just conventional, and then go from there. Like we were talking, if you do your least damage to most damage, or in this case simple to more complex, starting off with a simple forcible entry method and continuing to get more complex as you progress. So, temper plate glass doors, these are a little tougher because they are heavy and expensive, and you don't want to break them unless absolutely necessary. And it would cause a large opening that you can now not close. It's open and glass is everywhere. It's just kind of a pain. So here's a good note. If you want to avoid breaking the glass like we do, this would be a good through the lock method. So especially if this isn't your initial through the front door fire attack, if you're going through a secondary door, or you're just opening these up later in the incident, through the lock is a good way to do this, because then you don't break the glass and you can maintain the door and door control. So that's why it's really good to practice through the lock. So some methods that can be used to force swinging doors. Basically just using the irons or using the different tools. So if you're using irons, using the adze or using the forks, if you're just forcing an inward swinging door, it's best to use the forks of the Halligan, bevel towards the door, and start forcing the door that way. If you're forcing an outward swinging door, you'd want to use the adze, drive it in, and force the door that way. Sliding doors. So these are common, especially as like back doors, patio doors. Sliding doors can have a lot of play in themselves. Like like lifting the sliding panel out of its track is a good way to do it. A lot of those, the way they lock is they just have a hook that like comes up and latches in the door jamb. And if you can open the back part of the door up, then you can. If you open the back part of the door up, then you can, or lift it up, and you can slide it
All right.
and defeat the lock that way.
What was the issue?
The
chain.
photo eyes weren't, well, you guys probably pulled the hand chain to open it, didn't you? Or you been backing in?
We have to back in.
Oh, you never come in that door?
No, we're not
So-
allowed to go through the lot there because there's too much of a dip.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So that chain on the back, the hand chain, you know, there's one that pulls the clutch out. And I got in there, I was like, there's no control power, there's no 24 volt, the board's all dead. Well, there's an interlock switch in there, like a little limit. So when you've got that thing pulled down and hooked where you can hand roll it, you lose all your control power. I guess so somebody can't get the door kicked on while the guy's handling the chain.
Gotcha.
So when we did that, we had to fiddle with your eyes a little bit on it. Somebody probably, maybe it gave them trouble, they wanted to raise it, they couldn't raise it, they pulled the hand deal because the eyes were out of line, you know?
I bet you're right. Well,
If
thank you guys.
Yeah, if it's giving you trouble, and if you look at those eyes, you know, they blink, like if you can walk over one that's working, you block it, and it starts blinking fast green. You know, you can kind of fiddle. If you can ever get them to turn solid, just walking over there and doing that a little bit. Put it back to working, but if you don't mess it, it will come to too. I just think.
No, man, that's awesome.
That probably aggravates you, you know, when you just go.
My kid runs into mine all the time.
Yeah, he's what?
He's always running into it on
Oh.
his bike.
Pushing the eyes out.
Oh yeah. I can't tell you how many times I do.
Patio door. A patio door, you can probably just break the glass and run wild, can't you?
Yeah.
Do they make you pry them too?
Well, once you break the glass, you can't unbreak it. So it's
Yeah.
kinda,
They frown on that.
yeah,
Yeah, generally we try to just bump them out of the track.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Don't be so destructive.
Lifting the back end of it up. If it's
Twist
got
it
enough
out.
play, you can lift the back end up and then it'll slide out from underneath
Yeah,
the
for sure.
latch. But,
Just like you were setting it in there.
mhm. Yep.
Pretty wild.
Yep.
You guys have a good day.
Yeah,
Hey, thanks,
thank
we'll
you.
see you guys.
I'm gonna look. I'm gonna have a order to clean your gutters. I'm gonna mess around with that, so I may still be here in a little bit.
Alright,
Okay.
perfect.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
See ya.
That's some of the techniques for the sliding doors. All right, so forcing security doors and gates, roll-up doors. Some of the things we like at storage units. These are probably the most common place where we run into a lot of these. You can cut off if you can get to the padlock. Just cutting off the padlock would be the easiest, and rolling the door up itself. You can cut the opening near the lock, or cutting out a section of the door. So just like any door that you're going to force, you're just continually sizing it up. So you're sizing it up to if you're going through the lock, or your first thing you're looking for is, can I see the hinges? Can I not see the hinges? Okay, I can see the hinges. This is going to be outwards. And then you're sizing up the lock mechanism. If you're going to go through the lock, then you're looking at the lock. You're seeing if it's just a cylinder lock or if it's just the handle. What you can do from there. So this is some different tools for pulling the lock to go through the lock. So the K tool will set over it, and then you drive it down, and then pry it off with the adze of the Halligan. So and then that exposes the inner part of the lock, so where you can move the tumbler and unlock the lock. So an A-tool, we don't have one of these. One of our Halligan adze is actually shaped like an A-tool, but it's not a true A-tool. But it's the same type of tool. You just would slip it over, drive it down, and pull the lock off. J-tool. So this would be, I guess, between if you're going to be forcing a panic door, you can slide through the opening and then turn it, and then pull the panic bar, and then by pulling on the panic bar, then it would unlock the door, just like somebody was pushing it from the inside. Shove knife, just for as far as these only work on knobs. These will not work on deadbolt, and the way the knob works is the latch has where it would hit the strike plate. The latch is actually shaped like this, so it's tapered and comes down like that. So then here's the door jamb. So where it would close, there's just kind of there's the strike plate and then an opening where this would go in and stop. So what will keep this locked is this little spring-loaded pin over here. So as long as this pin is out, the door will open. So, but whenever it closes, it pushes this pin down, and then the knob will be locked. So if it's one of those types that has this, like that door would have it, until you make a gap between the door and the jamb here and allow this pin to travel out, then you won't be able to use a shove knife if it has this pin. Most doors now, unless they're an older interior door, will have this on the lock. So if this pin's still depressed, you will not be able to shove knife that open. As soon as this pin comes out, just like, you know, as soon as this pin would come out, if you spread the gap between the door and the jamb, a lot of times, a lot of doors have a gap themselves, so you might be able to get it with a shove knife. It might already have a gap big enough. But if it doesn't, a lot of times you can flex the door enough with the Halligan and then get the shove knife in. And then because whenever you flex the door and the jamb, it allows this pin to travel out, and then it allows your shove knife to come in and hook the latch and pull it into the door, and then you're good to go. So does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's kind of the inner workings of using the shove knife. So breaking a hasp, this would be for a padlock. Obviously we're forcing the padlock here, so this would be basically leaving the lock in place and just breaking the latch that would go before the padlock. Here's kind of some ways to break a padlock. If you're cutting a high security padlock, you can stabilize the lock with locking pliers. Sometimes guys have like pliers with chains welded to them, like it was in that earlier slide, so they can lock it and then pull it back while somebody cuts it. Seems like most of the time you can just cut the lock. I don't have.
I've never seen that before.
Yeah, I don't.
Have you seen that?
I've seen them
it,
do
yeah.
that, but it always seems to me like if you're cutting the lock, it doesn't jump around that much. Like once you put pressure on it, it pretty much stays. But I haven't really cut a lot of locks with the K12 either. I usually bolt cutter them or break them with the Halligan. So one thing I found on padlocks, so we know you can use the forks around the top of the padlock. You can slide the forks just like this, and start twisting it and then break it. That works pretty good. And then also using the spike of the Halligan, you can drive in here. And then you can drive in there, and then you can twist it and then hit it just like that too. But one thing I've found on a lot of locks, which this one kind of, you can tell it has a little bigger top part, but for a smaller lock that works pretty good, or just holding it and driving it down, it'll break it. But if it's got a real long, like elongated, what I would call like a U-bolt or whatever top, you can't do that because it'll just bend these out. These will just bend out this way, and then you've got just a big opening. Because I've tried that before on a really tall lock like that, and that's what happened, and then it was really frustrating. So that one, I think on these, you're better to use the forks. If they're smaller or like a cheaper lock, I think you can use the spike of the Halligan and drive it in there, break it. But so here's some ideas for forcing overhead doors, just cutting the opening, lifting doors, or lifting the door. I think there's several different types of ways you can do the overhead
Speak
door.
on it. Speak on what's on your mind.
I think we all know the best way, and that is to cut the door. I'm really using the whiteboard a lot on this one, but just if your door's like this, we know the mechanics of the door is they're in panels. So, and in between each panel there's rollers, and then on the bottom there's a reinforcement bar on the bottom panel. A lot of times, if you cut the door, there's different methods. The best method is to basically, you can do like 2 cuts, and then you can use the door as kind of peel it back as one piece, or you can use 3 cuts if you're just getting a big opening. And basically what you do for that is you just cut down once, one vertical cut, and whenever you cut down vertical, you want to be sure and plunge the saw through this bottom bar, not into the concrete, like really, you don't want to really bury it in the concrete, but you just want to be sure and cut all the way through that bottom panel. Because if you don't, then you won't be able to peel the door back. So if you cut all the way down, cut through the bar, and then you come across, and depending on your panels, if the panels are, head height or maybe just above, and if you can run your blade through this seam, you'll make this top cut super fast. Because you're just cutting the seam, and all you're doing is just cutting these rollers, and then you're leaving this top panel complete. Or if you have to, if it's not in a good spot, if it's going to be too low or if it's too high, you can't reach it, then you just make your horizontal cut wherever, and then you come back down this other side. But running through the seam is really good because that horizontal cut takes a lot of time, and if it's a really really hot fire, you want to get it cut and get out of the way as quick as possible. So if you can cut through this seam and you can cut these roller pins, or just wherever the roller pin attaches to the door, you'll be a lot faster. And then what this does too is if you cut, you want to leave a good foot or foot and a half, depending on how wide the door is. If you got a real big door, you can leave a lot of space. But that basically, because the doors, all the panels, if you cut it completely out and you don't leave anything on the side, the whole rest of the door will come rolling down. There's nothing to hold the rest of the door up. But if you leave a foot to 2 feet on each side, then that will stay up. That'll just stay in one piece, or basically just create legs to hold the rest of the door up, and won't allow it to just come rolling. Because if you cut it all, then it'll all just come rolling down. So that's a good method for cutting the doors. I wouldn't say the best method. So blocking all the overhead doors. So that's kind of what we're talking about. By doing this, we're blocking the overhead doors. We don't have to do any type of blocking really. We don't have to put like a pike pole in the track or vice grips in the track. We don't have to do anything like that if we can cut it like this. Forcing fire doors. These are kind of, we don't normally ever have to do this because a lot of times we want to leave them in place because that's usually, hopefully that's kind of containing the spread of the fire. But basically what their fire doors are made is they're designed to cover the doorway openings and basically fireproof doors that won't allow fire to spread as easily. There's interior and exterior. They should not lock when they're in place, so we shouldn't really have to force them anyway. So the exterior doors are a little different. They will probably be locked, but that's normally if they're like it's saying if it's a structure that's close to an adjacent structure that would need a fire door to protect the adjacent structure. So here's just some roll-up fire doors. These are, this would be like we were talking about. They're rolled up, so you need to basically block this door open or keep it open to keep it from rolling back down and blocking egress. So, like I was saying, leaving the fire doors in place is preferable, but ultimately, if we got to get into the room that's on fire, then that's what we have to do. So, how should we treat them? We should just treat them with caution and remember that they are designed to cut off egress. So they're designed to cut off the egress or the path or flow path for the fire. They're designed to create egress for victims, but we just want to be sure that they don't close behind us after we make entry or make our way through a structure and block us off from ventilation or hose lines or anything like that. So do you guys have any questions about forcible entry? Some of the topics we covered? Anything like that? No? Okay, so now we're going to do our quiz.
Or what?
Our quiz. So I've got the quiz out here. What we'll do is I'll pass this out. So I got pens and stuff for you guys. If you guys need to take a break, go ahead and take a break, and we can come back and take the take the quiz. If you guys are good, we'll go ahead and start. Got a pencil? Need one?
I do.
Okay. Didn't find the class prepared, that's failure. Alright, well, we got our test taken. I will score these and let you guys know the results. And we're gonna probably take a quick break and then move out to our first lunchroom prop and do the practical portion of the class. So we will head that way here shortly.